I'd like to welcome F in room 3, which means that we're going to listen to from the University of Alaska and Joe from Chugach and UAA tell us about food sovereignty of the Chugach region. Folks online, can you make sure that you are muted at the end of the session when we're doing unmute and chat with us, or put your questions in the chat at the end of the session, and go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining. University of Alaska Anchorage, and I teach in dietetics and nutrition, also dabble in public health, and I am here really just to introduce a South Central coastal region of Alaska. And I don't think he would do himself justice because he's such a humble man. He has been instrumental in so many areas within our community, within dietetics, nutrition, within the diet, and also people down in the coastal section of South Central Alaska. So Joe is great work that he helped out with, and really that can help us and the people move forward with some food sovereignty issues and areas within that area. So thank you. And here's Joe for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I am Joe Nyholm. I'm a dietitian with Chugach Native Health Organization down on the Kenai Peninsula. We operate over towards Prince, then also across from Homer, across the bay from Homer. And what I did for my graduate research project was I analyzed a food assessment survey that was done in my region that I work in, and kind of looked at it from the lens of food security and food sovereignty. Should I just
try one more time? There you go.
Okay, so just want to say thanks to the communities in my region for letting me use the data. I know that a lot of times people come to these communities in rural Alaska and perform surveys, and sometimes results don't come out of it. So I wanted to just acknowledge that I was able to use that, and want to be thankful to them. Willow, she's the director of this, over a couple acronyms, but she's the one that let me use the data. She's the one that collected it all. And then just thanks to the UAA faculty that I worked with to give me the opportunity. So this is Seward. All the communities that I work in and did this research or did all this work in was coastal communities. It looks like this right now in Seward because there's like 4 feet of snow. We definitely got hit pretty hard, so we're recovering on the roads. So CRRC is the Chugach Regional Resource Commission. They deal with a lot of natural resources in our community. They have a shellfish hatchery, stuff, marine life, education. ANTHC is the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. SNAP, a lot of people are familiar with that. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And FDPIR, which is the Federal Distribution Program on Indian reservations. Kind of a mouthful, but it's kind of like SNAP, but on Indian reservations or tribal communities. Kind of the overview for my project, the background, the objectives, how I process the data and look through it all. I'll kind of share a little bit of the results. I'm shrinking this down to fit into 20 minutes. I won't go into everything because there's a ton of data. There's a 50 and tons of data points, so I won't go into much detail. And then I'll talk about what can be done with this information to maybe improve food security and food sovereignty. So in 2017, the CRRC completed a food assessment survey in my region. This was partially funded in collaboration with the First Nations Institute. It's like a national grant that tribal organizations could use this survey tool to kind of start to look into food security in their communities. The survey was really nice because it was broke down into 6 sections that kind of follow a lot of the models that are, so it made it kind of an ideal situation to kind of break that down and make recommendations. And the one thing that the CRRC did was they changed the survey to make it more culturally relevant. So it's good for our 7 people, they're adults, they're 50 data points. These were open-ended questions, multiple choice, ranking, food frequency tables, so tons and tons of data. This is relevant is food insecurity in Alaska rural settings can at higher rates than the rest of the country. And then kind of trying to look at food security and increasing it, trying to piece together how people are using their traditional foods because that can improve diet quality. So kind of exploring those areas. I won't go into the definitions, but just here's the definition for food sovereignty. I like to look at it as a community level, people's right to sustainable foods that fit them culturally and kind of a bigger picture. And then food security, I look at it as kind of a smaller term, kind of as each person's right to nutritious foods, so they're not in hunger. So kind of just 2 terms, just to give people a good definition. And then how that kind of relates. So 1 out of 9 was, so this was from 2022. They were food insecure. Could be a lot worse. Prices kind of crazy. And then 1 out of 4 Native Americans was food insecure. And there wasn't really anything in my region to kind of show that. There still isn't like good research out there to show that, but hopefully my research or my data can kind of shed some light in that area. So the goal of this was to look at the data and kind of see what factors are impacting food security and food sovereignty for the Lutic and EAP people of the Chugach region. The main goal was to take that data and make something happen with it and turn it into a form that the CRCC and all these tribal communities can use and look at. And then the second objective was to try to add some recommendations that kind of look in the area of food security and food sovereignty and see if anything can be done in those areas. So what I did first was I took that 50 questions, 50 data points, and I analyzed since I didn't want to, as just one person, I took questions that maybe people didn't quite answer or didn't, there's a lot of survey fatigue later in the survey, so maybe some of the questions at the end people weren't fully engaged with. So I kind of narrowed it down, eliminated some questions, maybe they weren't completely relevant. And then the remaining questions, organized all that data. It was all paper surveys from 2017, so I put it into Excel and made it pretty so I could organize it and go through it. And then I analyzed it. I found key themes in the multiple, the free response questions, I made graphs, percentages, kind of did all the data part of it. And then finally, I made recommendations based on each of those 6 sections of the survey that aligned with our current kind of models of food sovereignty. So I'll kind of go through some of those questions lightly here. I won't go into like numbers as much, but also kind of talk about each section individually with the recommendations that I came up with. Okay, data. So the first section of the survey was about community food resources. Some of these questions were focused on what people thought of food resources in their communities. They had difficulty getting certain, and then also looking at what they found would be the most improve their access to food resources. So one thing that was interesting that people were saying is SNAP funds and assistance programs in their eyes. So maybe there's a possible bias against that. Further explore that area. School and travel gardens weren't really existent in a lot of the communities. A lot of people found that vegetables and at least some foods were very difficult to get in their community. So that's kind of a strong signal of food insecurity. And then finally, people found that information on preparing and growing traditional foods would be the most helpful to improve their food systems. My recommendations from this section were to kind of further bring more awareness to those food assistance programs. And this, in the survey, there wasn't a section PPIR program, which I think could be really beneficial in these communities because they're so small. Our smallest community is about 30 people, and our biggest rural community is 300, and Seward's kind of different because it's on the road system, but that's kind of the range. And some of those communities have no stores, some have one. So SNAP might not completely fit these communities as well as FDPR, because I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but they differ in the way that FDPR people get a certain amount of food in a storage placed on their community versus where SNAP you buy food in the store with funds. So potentially FDPR would give people more food. So, but there's also the aspect that kind of, I think there's rumors that you might be able to use both programs at once in these rural communities. So that could be really cool to help with insecurity. Okay, so the second section was on diet and health. These questions were based on what people rate their health as, what their diet, how they feel they're doing with their diet, where they're getting their information from on nutrition, and then also if they think any problems in are due to access to healthy foods. So one interesting part of this was people in general ranked their health as really high, but then there was a lower proportion that ranked their diet quite as high. So maybe there's a disconnect in what people tie diet to their health. So that could be some further research or further kind of questions could be asked on that. One really good thing that I found was people were getting a lot of their nutrition information from the clinics. When this survey was done, there was no dietitian in the region. And in 2017, I was hired. So now there is a dietitian in the region. So that's good to see. But they were already getting most of their information from the sources. So. And then health problems. A lot of people did identify that the lack of healthy foods were leading to health problems in their communities. And a lot of people were citing sugary beverages as a big piece of that. So some of the recommendations I have for this section are already done. So having a registered dietitian, most of the region is covered by my organization, but Valdez is kind of complicated, but they don't have one yet. So still working on that piece. I think FDPIR could be used, that they have a nutrition education component that could be utilized. They do a lot of culturally relevant foods. I know they're trying to bring in a lot more kind of Alaska specific foods to their offering. So that could be good to see. And then for Chugach, we're expanding our Seward clinic, and I think there's opportunity there with new staff to bring in more education pieces. So the third section is on one thing to note on this was the survey. There's 87 for only adults. There's that answered or younger individuals. So I think right off the bat would be an area to kind of people were asked about the youth and if they're interested in food. And most people said yes, but the question also was kind of if anyone had more people. Like there was a number of people that said yes, but there's a higher number of people that had suggestions that shows that people are active in thinking in that aspect. And then another part of the section was asking people about if they would tell their leaders in the government, state and federal, of what they want them to know about their food systems. And overwhelmingly, people wanted them to know about how blanketing regulations on food resources, hunting might not fit in these rural communities compared to the whole state. And then also just the high cost of, they really highlighted this. So for the section, I think, again, kind of read category, trying to capture information, their perspectives. And also, because this was done in 2017, extending that to the 20 to 30-year-old group, because I think those are the future leaders of the community. So I think getting their input is really, really important. And then trying to figure out a way, I'm not an expert in this area, but kind of working in the kind of legal aspects, the regulatory part of it and what bottlenecks might happen. I know during COVID, there was a lot of people trying to use the resources they had available. Regulations weren't allowing that, so there was some instances of emergency hunts, but I think kind of now when we're not in an emergency situation could be a good plan of action. And then again, kind of trying to SNAP and the food assistance programs to help with that cost issue. And then gardens, Just doing that aspect too, I think could help. Second, governance. People are asked if they were getting any support from policies on traditional food use and harvesting. Most people were saying no, which is not good to see, but again, people were aware of the SNAP benefits that are available to them for subsistence use. You can buy something efficient supplies with those funds too. So a lot of people mentioned fuel and transportation as one of the factors. People were asked about learn involved with traditional food traditions. Many people said there weren't any in the schools, but there are a lot of summer programs in the community. There's like seed camps that do like these week-long activities for the kids. And another thing to mention is in 2019, after the survey, my organization does more than just healthcare. We also have a heritage department, and they develop these traditional food heritage kits that teachers can kind of loan out of the and use that. It's like a week-long lesson plan in the schools. So I think they released those in 2019 and COVID happened, so they haven't really been used a lot. So that'd be really cool to see because it involves elders from the communities and it's a really good program. So our recommendations, I think bringing again more awareness to these food assistance programs. I think just letting people know that they can use those benefits for more than just foods. Expanding those school programming to things like CETA school, and then those traditional heritage kits, things in those areas. So this is one of my favorite sections. It's food resources. I'll show one graph that I made. It's going to be a little overwhelming, but I'll try to explain some of it. So it's kind of crazy, but this is a food frequency table. People are asked if they ate foods a lot, medium amount, a low amount, or they never had those foods. Ours are never had those foods. So you can see things like pear, beaver, sea otter, sea cucumber. People aren't eating those foods. And then you can see foods that people are eating a lot of, like salmon, bidarkies, berries. People are always having those foods. So I think the usefulness of this table is you could kind of pair that with maybe population counts in the regions. You can find out what foods are overutilized, underutilized, and then you could maybe have an educational class. Bidarkies, or like you can kind of pair out where you need to kind of focus your efforts. So for me, as a diabetes program manager, this is where I choose what to drive classes and education. So I kind of mentioned that first one, I can kind of combine that with population counts. Another question in this section where people are asked about what's limiting their access. Again, it was fuel and transportation. I know Cordova is in our region and they have a tribal boat that they use for community members to go hunting, fishing, and they use the foods that are caught to feed the elders in the community. So that's one thing that's successful in the region that the rest of the region can look to. And then people are asked specifically if they're able to foods as they would like, and over half saying that they weren't able to. That's another big kind of correlation piece that even though it's not specifically asked, you can kind of draw a little bit of conclusion that can be worked on. So again, kind of a review recommendations would be pairing those population counts with the food frequency use, looking for ways to help maybe fund rural transportation costs. I'm not an expert in this area, but there's something called revolving loan funds and ways that communities can kind of get money for fuel. And then pairing with third-party organizations would be a good idea. There's plenty of people here at this conference that would be really useful to kind of work with. Alaska Villages Initiative, the Intertribal Agricultural Council, ANTHC, and pairing ways to educate people on harvesting sustainable use of their resources. Be a good place. Last section is on natural resources and the environment. Here, people were asked about if they knew if their communities had land use plans, and then also asked about how the environment and changes in the environment are affecting them. And what is most vulnerable to these changes. So most people didn't know if they had a land use plan and if it even addressed food use or traditional food use or sustainability. People were aware of environmental changes. They were aware of like ocean temperature change, but not things like acidity. So maybe like base level topics. And then people mostly were worried about the sea life and salmon populations with the effects of climate change and environmental changes. So I think a big piece from this section would be to maybe review, update, or even food and land use plans, specifically addressing traditional foods and their sustainability and making sure they're there for the future. I did find one doing my project. It was the Canada Chiefs Conference. They built a community planning resource guide, which kind of laid out the whole process, which I think a lot of these communities could use out in my recommendations. All right, we made it through all the sections. So quick review, section 1, food resources. I think kind of bringing more information and awareness to the food assistance programs could be beneficial. Diet and health, I think the education piece is pretty well solved, or not solved, but I think with registered dietitian going around the region, that piece is pretty well covered. I think there's room in the FDPR program to offer more education. Culture, capturing that missing youth opinion and getting their input would be really important. And then visiting those emergency hunts, regulations, legal process, to make sure that people can use the foods when they need to. And then again, kind of touching on bringing more awareness to assistance programs for the organizational governance piece, just making the tribal councils more aware of those so they can let people know in the communities. Maybe looking at ways to have things like Cordova's tribal fishing boat, or looking at programs in the schools and heritage codes. Again, with the food resources, comparing population counts to the food use table. I think that's for me, that's the part that I'm most excited about. Trying to find ways to help people with finances, cost of fuel, and then those third-party partners, I think would be a good place to start. And then natural resources and environment, land use plans, revising those, making them more focused on the future and traditional foods and subsistence. I think those are key areas. So strengths and limitations of my whole project. The survey was nice to work with since it was culturally relevant. They changed that whole food frequency table to be foods that they knew that people used in this region. And then I like that the survey was broken down already into those sections that are based on models of food sovereignty already developed. So it wasn't, it was pretty well focused. I think a limitation was the length of the survey. Really long, lots of data. So I think people started to not answer the questions in the environmental section with the same enthusiasm they had in the beginning. It's from 2017 already, so food security issues have been kind of just ramping up and speeding up, it seems, and things have changed. COVID-19 impact a lot of food security, so again, 2017, that's almost ancient history now. And then just the amount of data, it was hard to focus with this project. I think the implications for this project were, it's the first survey of its kind done in this regional Alaska, so hopefully that helps drive programs. I know with me running the diabetes program, I'm going to be able to use all this data, so that's good. I think other programs around the state can also look at it and maybe make some decisions, or because a lot of organizations, they have large populations, there's not a lot of stuff for communities the size of like 300 people, so hopefully that helps other organizations with similar size populations. And then again, thanks to all the people I mentioned earlier. It wouldn't be possible. Questions? Comments?
We got
Can you touch a little bit more on what's included in the traditional foods heritage kit?
I can give you, if you search chugachmute.org and go to their heritage department. There'll be a whole bunch of different departments. You'll find all those kids. So yeah. They have like really detailed lesson plans for different age groups, like 8 to 13-year-olds and then high school age, and it's really detailed. It's cool.
What was that?
It's the heritage kits on the Chugach Mute website.
Get any like geographical reference, or like where did it ask where people were answering the questions from? And
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like it represented the whole region well, or was it concentrated in certain areas?
So there are 7. It was pretty heavily focused on the side of the region. Yeah, like I guess you have Alaska and it's Palmer's side had a lot of the majority, almost half the responses, Fort Graham and Nanwalek. And then Cordova, Valdez, like Chiniga, those all had a lot less responses. So it was much more one side, which is the more population on that side. So
Does it?
no, it's just Fort Graham, Nanwalek, Seward, Chiniga, Valdez, and Cordova.
Through your research and experience in the area that you had back in 2017, be like the lowest hanging fruit that you could think of that would help combat food insecurity anywhere?
I hesitate to kind of lean towards a food assistance program, but I really think the FDPIR program, it's because it varies so much from SNAP, where the communities have control of the food resource. You have your own inventory system. It's all in your control. I think that's maybe the lowest. It's not the lowest hanging fruit, but I think it has the most bang for the buck.
Is this data, where can you find it? Can you access it?
I think you could find it on the UAA graduate something. I mean, it might.
Yeah, so when our students present, and he writes up his paper, it's public data, what he does, but what we agreed upon with CRC and Chugach is that we wouldn't separate out per community the data, but that it would remain collective, just to protect the identity and that I would want to see. So what Joe did, which was a ton of work and a ton of data, is available on his paper. If you just Google him, it'll come up. And you Google that title, it's a long thesis will come up and you'll see all the data in there. And that's
Thank you. Yeah, I do. Oh, sorry. I provide the nutrition education for FDPIR. So I think this will be really helpful in helping to inform like what we do. And yeah, I agree there's a lot of room for growth and any other educational opportunities for having trying to experience more local travel.
Yeah, it's been a little challenging navigating FDPIR, and like I know Fort Graham at one point was trying to do it, but then COVID happened to stop and only EAC or Cordova is current.
Yeah, yeah. No, okay, yeah. We had a lot of drop off during COVID. Everyone moved to SNAP, but I think they're slowly starting to come back.
Yeah.
Can you maybe speak to any reasons why the responses were more heavily geared towards the Palmer area versus some of the
Well, definitely they have more population there, so that's one reason, but then I don't really know why. Maybe they're just more, Nanwalek specifically had the most responses, and the people are there a little more easygoing and kind of like they're okay with anything, and the other places are more reserved possibly, so that could have been slightly hard to say for sure.
I'm not sure if you'll know this, but you mentioned SNAP being able to buy vending machine equipment. Do you know, do the stores that sell this equipment need to be a SNAP authorized retailer, or is it just that they have that card, the class card here?
Entirely sure. I should know that, but yeah, I'd have to like dig a little bit in that. If anyone else knows. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we got to switch out
Okay.
for our next person, but thank you very much. All right, folks online, if you could make sure that you're muted, please. At the end of the session, we'll have Q&A. You can either put your questions in chat or unmute and ask them at that point. But really quick, let's welcome Matthew from Pilgrim Hot Springs. He's going to tell us about Pilgrim Hot Springs food production and distribution.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Matthew. I'm the farm manager at Pilgrim Hot Springs. Pilgrim Hot Springs is a farm located in Nome, Alaska. So we're way up in the Bering Strait. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about a little bit of our food production, the development of our farm, and what we're doing for distribution. So here's our foundation. We have a vision statement of being an exemplary, sustainable agriculture project at PHS, Pilgrim Hot Springs, which improves the food security, economy, and quality of life in the Bering Strait region. And there's also our mission statement there. We are looking to develop the land while respecting the cultural heritage, the land itself, the economy, and the local people. Overall, our main goal is food security for the Bering Strait. And it's something we're working towards in the food that we produce, but also the other aspects, which we'll get into in a little bit. So here gives you a little bit better idea of where we are, and just a few here has been to the Bering Strait region. Anyone? So few? You got 5 or 10 or so. It's a very beautiful area. It's in northwestern Alaska. This area is about 23,000 square miles, which is roughly the size of West Virginia. About 10,000 people that live here. In this area, there's about 20 recognized tribes, and they're all off of the road system. The only roads that really connect any villages would be from Nome, and then Nome out to Mary Ziglu, and then Nome to the council area. Teller's the only one that has inhabited all year. The other ones are more fish camps or seasonal residences. So there's not much access to the other villages besides flying or boating. So everything that is brought in is either flown in or barged, which can get awfully expensive. And it's very apparent when you go to the grocery store. You notice the cost. Bananas about 5 times more, so like $2.50 per pound. Milk is about $8 per gallon. Beef's about $8-9 per pound. So there's not a lot of local food production, and live a subsistence lifestyle. So gathering plants and berries, fishing, and traditional harvest of reindeer, moose. So there is that going in this very cool area, very unique. It kind of brings me to Pilgrim's story here. So Pilgrim Hot Springs is about 60 miles outside of Nome, and it's an Arctic oasis. It is possible for us to grow there because there is a fault line going through the area, and the ground is geothermically warmed. So the ground here never freezes year-round when everything around us is permafrost, barren tundra. You fly over, there's no trees on the hills, nothing growing, and then you see this area that is an oasis. There's trees, flora and fauna that are rarely seen anywhere in the Bering Strait. And that's why people have been coming here for thousands of years. So it was traditionally the Quermute land, and they would come there for the richness in game that were always eating on the vegetation, the plants that were there. And eventually around 1900, there was the gold rush in Nome. And later after that, settlers began making their way out there, and the property was homesteaded. So it's 260-acre tracts that were homesteaded. It's the only homestead in the Seward Peninsula because many other places you can't grow because of the permafrost. And this was a place that they would grow a little bit at, and it was a stop along the Chugach, the Pilgrim River, and along the way to the Chugach Road. Would stop there, and eventually the roadhouse burned, and the property was given to the Catholic Church in 1917. It was donated, and then subsequently, right after that, in 1918, the Spanish flu happened, and suffered a large impact to the population, and there was a lot of orphans. The Spanish flu impacted people that were mid-age healthy. So a lot of people that were parents, they passed away, and there was a great need for an orphanage. So this piece of property was a great place to do it because there was a lot of villages around that had a lot of orphans. They could self-subsist off the land through growing with the agriculture practices, and then doing traditional practices like fishing, harvesting game. And that ran for about 20 years or so until 1941. There's declining enrollment. Wasn't really a need for an orphanage anymore. And it was still upkept for a little bit. For about 50 years, the buildings were slightly repaired. The National Register of Historic Places. Then in 2009, the Catholic Church went bankrupt and had to liquidate some assets. And this was one that they weren't using. So it went up for sale and was bought back by Unatuk, which is a group of 7 Native corporations, nonprofits, and for-profit businesses that came together and said, this is a place for our people. We want to provide for them. And they bought the land and have slowly been developing it for the region. In 2010 to 2014, they did some more geothermal testing, trying to find that hotspot. Where's the geothermal coming from? And they're hoping to even do some more drilling and find where the mother lode is. Right now, we're the hottest geothermal in Alaska. So at about 400 feet, we have 192 degrees with 60 gallons per minute of artesianal flow. So no pumps required. And we're going to develop that later on, actually next year. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So we're still doing geothermal exploration, and we do that with Alaska Center for Energy and Power, ASAP. But then there's other things that also go on in the property, like the gardens. There was a farming effort between 2016 and 2018 that worked towards producing local food here at Pilgrim. And that lasted just for those 2 years. Funding and management wasn't there. So one of the co-managing owners came in and the farming efforts restarted just in 2022. And that's our church there. Just amazing structure in the middle of nowhere. Like you fly over and you see this behemoth just sticking out of the ground. Super neat. And it's still very structural, built all out of redwood, so very resistant to rot. And we're hoping to restore that as we go on. Amanda Tordahl. Amanda or Amanda. And this is some of the production, like in 1907 there. So you can kind of see the Chugach Mountain. Pilgrim really, it has a mountain range to block all the storms. Then we have the warm. We have 20+ hour light during the growing season. So it's a farmer's dream. I mean, you go here and you can get cabbages, you know, that you're putting over your shoulder. So the crops really love the soil. It's a sandy, clay-like soil. Hydrology is very close to the surface, so it's only about 30 inches of water. So we have to watch where you put outhouses because you don't want steamy poop. But yeah, the groundwater is warm. So you dig a hole 30 inches down, it's warm water. You stick your hand in the soil 5-6 inches and it's 50-60 degrees. So the ground is warm, and that's why this property is so unique. Here's a little bit of our geothermal, and that's our main well that was put in about 2014 there. This kind of shows the Chugach fault line there. It goes right along the base of the mountains, and then our property is like right there, about square 320 acres. And we have a site that are active. Some of them have been capped, done a lot of testing to try to find where that hot spot is coming from. And there's still areas we haven't explored yet that we're looking to. But this next year, we're getting a geothermal power plant, and it's a self-contained unit, goes in a connex, only about 40 feet long. And we'll hook that up. We'll have batteries to store the power, and then we'll produce about 60 megawatts of energy, which is more than enough to support what we have going on. So we'll be able to heat and power our cabins. We have 3 cabins for residents and guests. We have one for our caretaker and then some farm staff housing. So we'll be able to power all that, and then the greenhouses and our low tunnels and high tunnels, and we'll be able to produce in a place that is covered with permafrost and very inaccessible. So this is a little oasis that can provide for the people of the Bering Straits. And we're hoping to develop it as we go forward the next few years. This kind of shows the property a little bit better. Here's that church that you saw. We have the nuns' quarters, which is where I live and stay. The dormitory where the kids stayed, about 75 kids. There's about 4 nuns, 2 brothers, a father. There's a few other outbuildings, a cannery, father's quarters. Here's the old pool. So this pool here is about 95 degrees. You could just hop in it. None of this melts. I mean, none of this freezes. Throughout the winter, the slough's always open and this ground is always warm. Here it's frozen solid. And this is what the rest of the Bering Strait typically looks like, is tundras. But you find an abundance of cottonwoods, alder, moose love it here. Muskox enjoy it in the winter when there's not many people there. And yeah, it's just this really unique place. And here's our little farming effort. We have about 5 acres of fields that are ready to go into production, to increase to about 10 to 15 acres, which is not a huge tract of land, but for the small scale agriculture that we're looking to focus on, it's something, you know, it's something we can work with and expand with. And yeah, it's really good place to begin. And this is Unatuk by 7 native corporations. So we have White Mountain Native Corporation, Sitnasauk Council, for-profit businesses like Bering Straits Native Corporation, nonprofits like Coeric, and NSCDC, which is Norton Sound Economic Development Corporation, and then Mary's Igloo as well. So they came together, pooled their money, bought this to be a place for the people who occupy the region. And our focus is on 4 pillars here. So we have a few cabins, like I said, the hot springs that are free for people to come to. We have a little pool. It wasn't that one that I showed you, but it's a nicely landscaped pool. We just put in a few hot tubs, so many people come there. Hot springs, have a day with their family. And we're also looking to culture and the history. So interestingly enough, there is a few mass graves on the site from the pandemic. It was the only thawed area in the middle of the winter. So that's where the bodies went. And we recently did some GPR work, ground penetrating radar, to uncover those. They were lost, but we've now found them. So preserving that, preserving the buildings, and figuring out how to buildings as a place to educate, tell us the history of the region. And then the clean energy, which is very exciting, because Nome is ran off of diesel generators, always running to produce the energy. And if we're able to get to 250 degrees or so, if we find that mother lode, then you could start looking at options of exporting power and producing a clean energy source for the region, which it may only go to Nome, but that would greatly reduce their carbon footprint and just be amazing. It would reduce the cost of electricity and be so beneficial. And then food security, which is kind of what we're here for. Food security, making local food, fresh food, that is very big to the people of Bering Strait, wanting fresh local food, because oftentimes when you go to the store, it's crazy to sound like to hear this, but on your food, it's in the store, it's wilted, bruised, damaged, and it's fault. It's the fact that it takes 2 to 3 weeks to ship up, you know, from Seattle, or it may sit in the Connex in Anchorage for a week or 2. So it's not the produce manager's fault, it's just the lack of food that's available, fresh food and local food. So we're working on developing the site, and we have a tourism source, recreation, events, and agriculture that's currently bringing in money, grant funded. So a lot of the projects that we do is because of grants. So we're working on developing our infrastructure, which is fairly small right now. We have a little greenhouse that we started our starts in. It's our second year of production, so we're building up some of the infrastructure, and some of this was from the last farming efforts, so we're lucky to have that already in. And we have a fenced-in garden, trying to keep the moose out. They love their greens and they're abundant there, lots of moose. And we through that valley, we found out that our outhouse should be tied down this past winter, as they go 50 feet in the woods. So it's very, and we try to create a little climate by putting that fencing up. I can't really see it, but just built a produce washing station with the help from a grant, and really looking at getting this high. This was put farming effort, and we want to put end walls on it, ventilation, access doors, and make it easy to roll up when you're not using down. So if any of you guys got cool ideas about high tunnels, I'd love to talk to you about it. And yeah, just slowly develop to a self-sufficient farm that can operate year-round. Once we get that power plant, because then we can have electricity on site, have someone there all year. A lot of opportunities expand once we have that electricity. And we have a little bit of equipment right now. Our two main units are the BCS and the John Deere. BCS is an awesome machine. Just the farmer's right hand. This thing is amazing, so many different attachments. And if any of you guys are familiar, the Power Harrow and the favorite ones, attachments, the Power Harrow, it's a vertical tillage instead of a horizontal tillage. So it keeps the top 4 inches of the soil, still aerates it. And the rotary plow is really good for making raised beds. If any of you guys ever done one of those. The tractor we were able to get, which kind of started this farming effort again, and we wouldn't be able to do the work we have without them. A little bit about our irrigation system. We have 3 sources of irrigation. Our primary source is from the Pilgrim River, which is about 2,200 feet across Mary's Igloo's land. So we have a small 2-inch pipeline going to the river, and holding tanks in our irrigation shack. And we just bought some it's actually like a roofing material, and a settling pond next year, so we can pump the water from the river, warm it up, because it comes out of the river at about 45-50 degrees. It's very cool, and we would like to warm it up a little bit before we put it on plants. We'll get that installed next year. We use a drip irrigation system. Conserves the water, especially when we're, we have such small tanks and we have to pump consistently to fill those up. It's very conservative on water. We also like it because it helps control the weeds. We done broadcast irrigation before. Wherever the water touches, whether it's a good plant or a weed, and irrigation can kind of control where it goes. And next year we're moving fully over to that. Just simplicity, increased crop yields, less water. And yeah, a little bit more into how we're developing the farm. We reclaimed some fields, so they were growing up with alders and willows and just became unusable. So these have been brushed out and are currently fallow right now, letting the decay. We got about 1 acre back. Like I said, we have around 5 acres of tillable ground, so every acre counts to us. And eventually we would like to turn this into hay, so we can hay the ground, which is non-existent in Bering Strait. There's no place you can hay. There are some people are developing tundra and have horses on the tundra, but since tundra's rough, takes a while to develop, to thaw out. So we could provide a hay source to people to increase food production. They could have livestock, chickens, turkeys, goats, all the sort. And right now a bale of hay is $50 because it comes up from Seattle or Anchorage here. And if we could drop that price to half or a quarter of that, I mean, that'd be revolutionary for people. they could start producing livestock, increasing food security, bringing that cost of beef from $9 a pound down to $5 or $4. Something just to lighten up the load that people are having to pay for food. And here's a little bit about our field preparation. Just mow them first, break them out, get all the hay off, we compost that, and it's a great source of compost. It's hard finding soil in the Arctic, so we try to make our own. And this will be something that we'll use probably next year. It takes a year or two to fully decompose. And something we're moving towards is solarization, is putting the plastic down, and so much better than tilling, because each one of these, I mean, weeds that you see here, they're still alive and they definitely will come back. This kind of shows what we're working with. Rooting of about 4 to 5 inches. I mean, it's about that big of just thick a mat of roots. So each one of those will turn into a plant. So that's why the solarization really helps to kill off those weeds and the things that we don't want in the garden. And we're fully organic, so no pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, anything of the sort. And here's some soil amendments that we found to be helpful. We're building our soil up to produce better yields, produce better vegetables, and sulfate of potash, blood meal, bone meal. This is horse manure, which is nice. There's people up there that have horses, and you're lucky enough to get a big, and it's great. And yeah, we love this fish fertilizer concentrate that goes in our irrigation system. Really good for nitrogen, and it's like I said, working on building the soil. The soil is what comes first. You need good soil to grow good crops, and that's something we're slowly working on, understanding that it takes many years, but each year we get our soil test results and try to move in the right direction, see where we have to adjust. And we're liking the cover crops of red clover and rye. They're good for suppressing weeds, good for adding biomass in soil. Our soil is very sandy, so if we can add some more biomass, we'd love to help retain some more moisture. And yeah, just something we're always working on is trying to get the soil in the right condition, and something I'm still learning a lot about, but really excited about. And yeah, we do a little bit of composting. We just got this chipper shredder. It's a Merrimack chipper shredder, really well built, and we just mow the hay down. Have a lot of fields, but not all of it's in production. So we cut the hay down with our little brush cutter, and then with the BCS, and it becomes a really fine mulch, and it works good for a natural weed barrier, blocks out the light from the soil, so no photosynthesis for any of those weeds, and it also adds our organic layer. It's just really nice, and as you just build up that, it helps later down the road. And a little bit of composting as well, just with our compost piles. This is kind of what our site looks like, you know, being so far up north in the tundra. We are, planting, you know, we're getting our last breeze around the 1st. We finally opened the road on the 15th of June. This is what it looked like on May 25th or May 23rd. Lots of flooding. So it's definitely a little bit of a hard place to grow, but it's worth it for local food. Here's some things that we have planted here. Potatoes, lots of root crops, brassicas. Found the root crops from brassicas, love it. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, those are our favorite. Trying to expand potatoes to become a cash crop, something it's very heavy, costs a lot to get up there. So why don't we just grow it here? Direct seeds, carrots, turnips, onions, a staple in the Arctic because they store well, and people are used to it. They're used to growing up with that type of food. So this is a little bit about planting, and then our harvest. We have about 90 days of growing from June 1st to August 31st. This year was a little bit of a delayed planting season, and we're hoping to get everything in by about mid-June or mid-June next year. And we pull out about mid-September, do a final harvest there. And this is done with many people, and it has strong community support. We have some youth workers that come out a few days a week, and it's nice to get them involved in agriculture, show them that this is possible. And I hope that one day we see them as a farmer, and come back to Pilgrim. And many volunteers that come out, donate their time, and it's just really nice to see a strong community support. We're also hosting workshops, trying to give back, because we recognize that food security isn't just what we can grow, but it's what we can teach to people. So if we can teach people to produce their own food, everyone's better off. And we can keep that money in the community, start building skills and knowledge for the next generation. And our distribution model right now is mainly through farmers markets, selling at village stores, private sales and donations. We 2 village stores last year that we were able to sell at, and we're hoping to expand to 4 by next year, and then keeping to increase that number. We're a little bit limited on how we distribute because of our refrigeration. We don't have any, so we have to harvest and then get it out as fast as we can. So once we get refrigeration, our distribution quite a bit bigger, which would be nice. But yeah, we're looking to bring this to the communities, to be a place for people to produce food for themselves, give them opportunities. So if we can educate the people, they can produce their own food. And ideally, we create a food hub where people can sell this food that they make and incentivize people to produce food. There's hay here now. Start a herd of livestock or sheep. Do you want to make goat milk? Sure. Now, and this is something that we're working towards. It will definitely be in the works for the next 5 or 10 years. And we're really excited to see where this is going and to be a place that are often overlooked. A centrally located facility people could sell their stuff at, and learning a lot about other food hubs here today and yesterday. So it's kind of exciting to see what other people have going on. And then our future plans. We're hoping to expand potato production, hay production, things that are bulky, weigh a lot, that we can produce here. Finish our high tunnel, that geothermal heat that would be produced from a power plant, heat up this high tunnel, grow there year round, get some more people working there. We have very limited farm staff, and if we'd like to work with roofers to do some garden maintenance, do our pond liner, build a root cellar in Nome, because this site is only accessible from about mid-May, June, well, it's kind of like June, till about mid-September. So if it was in town, we could get at it all times of the year, get a refrigerated truck for our 2-hour drive to Nome, and further work on training, developing our brand, developing Pilgrim as a whole to be a place that provides for the people of the Bering Strait. And it's about all that I have, and I think I'm all out of time.
So we have Abby, and I'm sorry, I didn't get another name on here.
Erica?
Erica, presenting on building a healthy community, Ketchikan Wellness Coalition, and I need to get started.
So I am Erica Feldman. I am here on behalf of the Ketchikan. A little bit about me is military, so we traveled around quite a bit before settling in Anchorage, but I consider that home. And reconnected with my now husband, who had this big, beautiful garden in Texas, and we moved to Fairbanks. And so we tried to recreate that little sense of home. And that was the first kind of dive into gardening that I had. I thought amazing gardener. I thought I had a natural. We lived there for 3 years and had a thriving garden, and then we moved to Ketchikan, and I was very humbled at how difficult it was, but I think it turned it from like a fun hobby to actually realizing how food scarce it is, and it's more of a means of survival than just something fun to do, and kind of some of the barriers that people have when it comes to gardening in a more challenging climate. There person that oversees the building a health community right now. This is kind of a passion project for me, as I oversee a bunch of different things for the Wellness Coalition. So this is steps into it as far as the job goes.
I'm Abby. I've just briefly bounced all around Alaska, from the Alaska, southeast Alaska, up here, just seeing what kind of is in the food deserts, Alaska, and kindergartening as a be able to get things, healthy food for myself because it's not available. And you'll find yourself in a tiny grocery store where this watermelon of this size that costs $35 came from and whether or not you're gonna do it. Do I really need this really probably not good watermelon for $35? Yes, I did buy it. Was not good, but I went back and bought it because I wanted. But so understanding what kind of this lack of food and just develop this philosophy that I really do believe that every household, we could get business entities, could produce one meal for themselves a week, just growing, whether it be chicken, eggs, something that we could change the world. Everything through food distribution, locally, everything from economies to health, everything where that starts is kind of at the grassroots level.
So what is the Ketchikan Wellness Coalition? In 2007, they did a community needs assessment. Major gaps, they found out that something like the coalition needed to be established. It is not a direct services company, but we kind of identify gaps in the community with the barriers around it, help community access the resources that are already existing. And it started with 3 task forces and we are now up to 8. And some of them are reducing recidivism. We've got behavioral health, drug prevention, building out community. So it's all kind of put together, cultural equity, health equity. And it's nice to be able to all kind of be under the same thing with the same goal and have those resources all in one network. So under building a health community, we had a small grant, and these are some of the things that fall under it. The community garden is what we're mostly going to be highlighting today. But they also have put together a cookbook that I will be, we're going to do like a fun engagement thing, and I'm going to be away. We also pretty much just encourage people to get out into the community and work, you know, help with your mental health. So these are all kind of under the same building a healthy community umbrella. And then before we get into the gardens, I just wanted to kind of let people kind of understand where we're living. So we're in a remote island in Southeast. And we actually live on an island called Revilla Gagado. And within Ketchikan, there's about 8,500 people, outside population total about 13,000. We're on about 30 road, but it is spread out more than what you would think. So they've got north, kind of downtown, and then out south. One of the biggest things here was the food scarcity. Our food comes on barge. Sometimes that barge does not come. Food is very expensive here. We were just talking about how we were mad to work at the store sometimes, and it's like food scarcity looks different than, you know, others, but sometimes it is, can find those healthier options. They are just non-existent at the stores. We also had our first full big year of tourism after COVID, and sometimes that meant in the summertime 6 cruise ships, 1,000 people coming a day. And not everyone goes to the grocery store, but just a small fraction of that. You go to the grocery store and there is no food.
The seasonal people do go to the grocery store.
Yeah, yeah. So barriers, which kind of is why the community garden is.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the community garden aspect a little bit. Erica works with the Wellness Coalition, and I volunteer a lot of my time for the community gardens because I'm just really good at weaseling my way into situations wherever I go. So this garden, I should say gardens for the Ketchikan are about 3 years old. We started through a grant through the local hospital, Peace Health, and they gave us money to construct the beds. And what we did, and one of the things I think is really great that we found is rather than trying to create like a nonprofit or something like that for ourselves with all the logistics, we have partnered with the Wellness Coalition. So they are fiscal sponsor and take care of that. So we can really focus on growing our gardeners. So right now we have 3 gardens. There's one north of town, 2 within town, so we can catch kind of the urban people. One's next to a very large apartment, and another affiliated with like a senior living facility with accessible beds that they can use and grow their own food. So we are looking for other places. We found, especially in an island situation where we are at, surrounded by national forest, land is very hard to come by. So we try to partner with different people and organizations to let us use their land. And that's why one of them is with the senior center, which worked out great. One of them is with the Tongass Federal Credit Union. That may not be able to be there for a long time because they are going to be for other places and partnering with the city to try to come up with other places that are conducive to gardening that we can maybe expand and grow. So one of the things we did, we built these gardens and that's our resource, but then we started looking at how can we leverage this resource to really improve food security and what other resources are contained within those gardens. So we started thinking about the people and how we can use the gardeners that we have. At this point, you 4 per bed, and there's different rates. So we have a large bed, we have deep beds, we have berry beds, we have climbing beds. So we pay for those beds, but each person who has a bed also is required to donate a certain number of hours depending on the size of the bed. So as far as volunteer hours for different things. And we have, well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. But so anyway, so yeah, we're just looking at how we can also do in with our beds instead of just having gardeners and you come in, you just garden and that's it. And we leverage that to improve food security. So we looked at different crops that we could kind of easily grow to start with. And this is just where we've started, but garlic and potatoes were the 2 aspects that we started looking at and how we can use that. So creating like a community potato harvest, creating seed potato stores, different things like that, as well as the gardens. And here I'm talking about growing the gardeners too. So at this point, there are 36 individual gardeners in one organization that has like 3 beds, and that's Ketchikan Indian Community. And they partnered with us to expand some of those garlic potato projects, which I'll talk about a little bit more too. But so between all these gardeners, there's a minimum, this picture is covering it up, but we have a minimum of about 100 service hours our gardeners provide to the community. And it's not just within the gardens itself. We wanted to leverage them and food security and different things within the communities. So we do and teaching on different things. We've had mushroom logs, composting. We've got someone who's working with the USDA the seed ball. I can't think of what it's called right now, but trialing different rice varieties that will grow in our kind of short summers and climates, winter sowing workshops, edible landscaping, 2-day workshops, just some really great programming to educate the entire community, our members. And we're finding people with really hidden talents and interests are kind of coming through the woodwork and sharing that expertise with us. Yeah. One of the projects that started, we're in year 2, was a community potato harvest. And we looked at a certain point, we had some beds that we built that we didn't have gardeners for because it was brand new. We were trying to recruit them still. So we thought maybe we could use those as donation beds for the gardeners within our community or with community gardens first. And we would start with some seed potatoes. That was some acquisition to get those. It was actually surprisingly hard to get 5 pounds of native potatoes and hide potatoes to start our garden. But that first year we partnered with Ketchikan Indian Community, and they grew 2 beds. And ended up donating more than 90 pounds, I can't remember the exact number of potatoes to their members. And in addition to saving enough seed potatoes for the community gardens to use next year, which I think was about 15 to 20 pounds that we stored so that we could continue to harvest. This year, in year 2, the same Ketchikan Indian community expanded their project. So they've kind of run with that. They're using our beds, but we are and even further to some of our other gardens, and community gardens now have 2 beds as well, in addition to the Ketchikan Indian community. And we had an additional 90 pounds of potatoes that we actually opened up to the entire community this year. And we've saved, I think, 30 pounds of seed potatoes that we are also going to be donating to the entire community next year too. And then, because it's been a success, we've also just recently with the Forest Service for more land. And they're going to, we worked with them to get a grant, and now they are constructing some additional beds using our seed potatoes. And it will be an even bigger project to hopefully reach more families and more people with free potatoes and seed potatoes.
And that was like a big highlight, was we had huge community involvement. It was, you didn't have to have any kind of community involvement to come. And then everyone who joined that free day ended up taking home like 5 pounds, maybe?
I think it was more than 5 pounds. That was the goal with, and,
Per
you know,
family.
yeah. And some of them, you know, we had more piles of potatoes than we had families, so this is just a community harvest. But most of the gardeners, through our previous year of seed potatoes, they didn't, at the community gardens, they didn't need the seed potatoes, so everyone, most of those people not everyone, most of those people you see there were just community members who were at stage, so they could get some potatoes and hopefully some seed potatoes next year.
And it was super fun. Everyone brought their kids, and it was, you know, starting at a really young age, having that fun experience and getting to take the potatoes home. And we also used this as a recruitment tool to be able to get new community garden members. So some of our future goals, Abby kind of highlighted the partnership to expand. We wanted to make it more kind of another focus. Food farm festival is making it more indigenous and to the community, so we want to be able to highlight some of those foods. The high school did a soft launch of a lot of school excitement about gardening or composting, and we are very fortunate relationship with the school. So looking at turning that into and making a big composting. So right now there's one owned composting business, getting them involved in a yard. And that's where it's nice to be able to have something like this coalition, because it's so multifaceted. There is big benefits in gardening, so that behavioral health. We're looking at, you know, drug prevention, so doing something like season where you're getting the youth involved, they have skill building schools. And then we've also noticed after COVID hit, there is not really this sense of the involvement and, you know, a purpose to give back. So maybe trying to get more of the community and a sense of purpose put back into the community.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about some other planning stages, we're like, just like ideas that we can use with and certain things. We do apple berries in a very public area with some land that is kind of derelict now. You pick, anybody pick type situation, and varieties of fruit that do well. So that's around expanding schools. We already do have kids who composting with some of our volunteers through the gardens. Things like that. I will say, while volunteers are great and it's really well for us, it's not sustainable. So we've also talked about generating money and kind of be sustainable pay some people, because if we're really gonna be equitable and sustainable food security, we have to quit asking people to give in their food away. We have to be able to pay them, so we're looking at certain things like garlic sales, well, garlic sales, but finding ways to at least. And that's where the Ketchikan Wellness Coalition has come in, someone to spend all that time, because it's a full-time job to organize all of, all of these activities and volunteers, and especially if they have other jobs, or some people, they don't have that kind of time, so, looking at ways that we can truly make it affordable and pay people for their time and for the food that they're producing.
So I'm gonna do one small plug about, the Ketchikan Wellness Coalition has put up a Plating Up the Tongass cookbook. And it's kind of a, even if you don't garden, you can go out into the forest and harvest your own things and forage, and it takes one local ingredient, and then the rest is just stuff that you get from the store. So I'm giving this away to the first person that can name 5 things that you could find in the Tongass.
I mean, we're from Ketchikan, so it's going on.
Anybody outside of Ketchikan?
Big shot berries, just name a couple berries, I bet they grow in the Tonga.
What do you think species of bear?
Yeah, yeah, we do,
Yellow cedar.
yeah. Yeah, a lot,
You more.
yeah, yeah.
So here's just a small,
for you.
this is just a small list of the different things that you can find and harvest and eat. I also have these little postcards if you can think of any kind of recipe that you think would be cool in the book. We're always looking for more recipes. And yeah, the biggest thing is just, as I said, right now, we don't have any kind of full-time support for the Wellness Coalition to be able to focus on building a health community gardens focused. Within the next year, we're hoping to put a full-time position in there, look for more grant funding, and then kind of make it like this closed loop thing where every task force in Ketchikan Wellness Coalition is kind of putting into the community garden, because we have noticed that it does kind of hit a lot of the different aspects of what we're doing at the Wellness Coalition.
So who all is in the Wellness Coalition?
There's only 7 of us that work there. And then almost everyone, so there's an executive director, and I'm the logistics coordinator, and I handle everything that is not having a program coordinator. And then we've got 5 program coordinators.
How many task forces come in? Like, to do each of those 7, obviously the task force.
Yeah, so each of the 5 of them have their own task forces, and those are just community volunteers that are passionate about the different programs that we have.
I think it's really interesting to have an organization, especially in a small community, that focuses just on wellness and is working behind the scenes to try to promote that in their community, because there's not a lot of overarching reach
No.
the way Ketchikan Wellness.
Yeah. Most are just like one niche coalition, so like only drug prevention, you know, that sort of thing. So it is nice to have that, and then just the community involvement that we have right now is already. But bridging the gap, because right now it's very upper middle and poverty line. And in about 1,000 homeless people right now, we big native population, so it's bridging in that people that can't afford to shop at the local grocery, you know, are not able to even find housing, so bridging that.
The grant that we received, of course, in partnership with the community garden. Now, and community garden?
Yeah, it's specifically for the potato garden.
Split potato.
Yep, the potato garden. Yeah.
And do you know which grant that was, that
Oh, I would have to,
would be,
yeah, I can get that for you.
Yeah. I've got the grant.
We
Okay.
just partnered, so that one went through this and we provided expertise and kind of that.
it seems like more of the US.
Yeah, it is a USDA, yeah,
Of,
I'm just trying to come up with that.
The community food project. grant?
I think so. You guys can, yeah, I'll see if I can find this. I'm just looking through my email for that exact name.
And you can get it later, I'm around tomorrow. Maybe others who are interested in it. It's nice to know, especially the micro grants, things like that. That can be
Yeah, and we have been very heavily reliant on grants at this point. There's some really great grants out there.
I know with, I don't know if it's the same one or not, but I know, my organization, I applied for the USDA Community Food Project grant. And, we were awarded and we're in our planning year, and next year will be our implementation year. But, a landscaped food garden also for food insecurity.
The name of the grant was the diversity grant through the USDA.
There's also a lot of other USDA programs that you guys would like, or would be able to do community garden, like irrigation, composting units. There's other programs, getting direct money if you're already doing conservation.
Yeah.
If you guys already have it, that'd be good. Probably.
Yeah. Farm to school grant as a way to do that, we thriving community grants for our catchment systems.
Thank you.